I'm beginning again with the quote that we liked last time, Thomas Merton's quote, that it is better to find God on the threshold of despair than to risk our lives in a complacency that has never felt the need for forgiveness or comfort. And you all seem to really like that one. I know I did, but I noticed you all were commenting on that and wondered if you wanted to make any comments on what that means for you.
Well, despair is not a place that I ever want to go, but to think about, living a life of complacency where you never need God is worse.
Exactly.
So he's the only one I think that can, create situations in my life that lead me to despair, but I know he does it out of love.
Which is really good to know, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's scary in despair because he doesn't feel like he's very loving. Because our circumstances, I mean, we don't feel good. Sometimes we don't feel him. Everything looks frightening. And I don't know if you tend to do what I do, but I add guilt onto my despair. That's just from my background. I should be doing better. I shouldn't be feeling this way. And when I know I don't have to do that, it takes half the load away. I could still be in despair, but I don't have to be afraid of it.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember reading one time that I read in a book on suffering that it's not the actual suffering that ends up being the biggest pain for us, but the terror that comes with it. And the terror generally is that it'll always be like this. I'll always feel, life will always be like this, or I'll always feel like this, but there's a terror in despair, which I guess can create the despair and suffering that we can know we're feeling maybe, but know that it's just a feeling. It's not the truth. That where we are is where we are, and the one who loves us is bringing us, is here with us. And anyone else have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's funny. I just read something very similar to that, the other day, about the fact that it's not the actual suffering. Maybe it was in Tim Keller's book about walking through pain and suffering. I'm not sure, somewhere. I was reading something like that.
Yeah, that's how it is for me. And I think despair very often is the place where we're powerless.
Yeah.
We can't bring to ourselves the comfort we need.
Mm.
Sometimes the more you need comfort, the less able you are to even receive it from people and circumstances or anything. And I personally don't really like despair. I don't like being on the threshold of despair.
No.
It's not my favorite.
I don't like to go through the door either.
No. But I've never experienced them as fruitless.
Yeah.
Usually for me, it's been the taking away of something that I've thought I absolutely had to have to live, and discovering I didn't have to have it.
Yeah.
I have him, and that's much better. It's not mathematical. It's not like I went from 80% idolatry to 75% or something like that. It's relational. It's a presence of God that what was that? Am I vibrating or reverbing?
No, not for us. No.
Okay, I just had a really strange sound. But Carol, did you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I was just thinking about despair, about different ways you can interpret that, and I think for me, despair has been more when I just don't know what to do. It's like, you know, we all get stuff from our family, and I get from my dad. He always knew what to do. He was never helpless, and or in most of his life, because he would talk about that, how, you know, when he was in control, he didn't think about God. And it's like, even when you're thinking about God's rule in your life, you still tend to do things, you know, that you think are right. And that moment where I'm in despair because there's nothing I can do, or I don't know what to do, just in that moment, you can't help but turn back and see what he's doing rather than look at what you're doing. And, you know, and then you repent.
Right. Right. I love the way you said that, that you can't help but see what he's doing rather than what you're doing. Because those places are the places where at times reveal to us what we're doing and how different that is from what he's doing. And they can be tremendous gifts because what he's doing is life and health and peace. And generally speaking, what we're doing is the hamster wheel or pedaling harder, you know.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point. Okay, anybody else? Now the next verse, I don't want to spend time on it because I really want to get to comfort. But I think the complacency he's talking about is one that Job was talking about. Let me see, do I have to click this? I put it in reader's mode. Okay, there. Those who are at ease have contempt for misfortune. And I think that's exactly what Thomas Merton was talking about. You know, what's your problem? I think it was Emperor's New Groove or one of those Disney shows where he just like, why in the world that guy wanted to be a what do you call the people in poverty at the bottom of the food chain? A pauper. I'll never know. You know, she or she's with all her wealth and everything, and you know, his needs were bothering her, and in essence, she was almost blaming him for choosing to be a pauper. And you know, when life comes easy, you tend to think that it's this easy. It's this. When life's working for you, it's so easy to think that life is easy, that things aren't that hard. Problems are pretty surmountable, and to have the idea that those who aren't making it have a problem. It's, you know, it's their problem. I remember visiting my mom when she actually had a condo on the beach near just south of Long Beach, California. And so her neighbors were quite wealthy. She was just doing it for a year. But it was this gorgeous place where these were people who probably had 2 and 3 and 4 homes. And I just remember every time I was listening to her neighbors, you got the feeling that life is a bowl of cherries. And I just don't understand why everybody doesn't stop and, you know, pick and enjoy the fruit. And I'm listening thinking, huh. Almost as if, what's wrong with everybody that they're not having the good time I'm having? Or they don't have this positive outlook I have, who have millions of dollars. And misfortune is a gift because it humbles us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Mm.
Carol, if you can, I imagine you remember me in college.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember you too. It was a good memory, actually. Carol always got a few points higher than I did on the tests.
Oh.
That's
Well,
what I remember.
I don't remember any of that. I just remember you were very cool.
I was cool?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Uh, I I lived by my wits most of the time, and I tried to, and I didn't have to study that hard. I could generate ideas, write papers overnight, and all of my children have a disability in that area. They're very bright, but they can't put it together. They get tripped up in their words because the idea's in their head, but they can't get it out of their mouth. They, except I have one son who's better, much better, but they all have this inability to generate, to teach, to just do what I'm doing. And, you know, with my first son going through it, you know, that's something. Then my second, then my third, and then Anna. It changed everything about my understanding of school, understanding of what it costs people to learn some things, and how hard it can be. I mean, they're all exceptionally bright in their areas of strength. It's just they're spiky dippy, and I just had never thought about it being hard to do the things I took for granted. And I just wondered why other people pretended they couldn't do it. You know, why don't they just pick the cherries, you know, and enjoy the fruit? Why take so long? Why take so long to study or to write a paper? As if it's just a choice. They're choosing. And it was very humbling for me because I had a dad a lot. I remember your dad. Carol, I remember that time we went in West Palm and stayed there and went snorkeling.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I remember him. And I would say,
remember my mom?
No.
My stepmom, because she was were we in Palm Beach at that time?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I think she was your stepmom. I remember that.
And she was the Palm Beach socialite. I was just thinking about this as you were talking about the cherries, because I don't think she ever worked a day in her life. Her first husband, she was widowed, you know. She had the royal treatment, not as a child, but as a married lady. And, you know, she died from Parkinson's disease, and in the last 5 years of her life, I just watched her lose all that.
Right.
You know, the social graces and everything, but she took it so gracefully. She really did.
Wow.
She got to where, you know, she could hardly even talk, you know.
Well, that is amazing, you know, because if you, yeah, it's I lost track because I'm thinking about, I was ready for her to be in despair, and she wasn't. She handled it gracefully.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was more in despair. To take care of her, you know.
Oh, right.
My dad died. I'm coming back to take care of you, and she died the day I was leaving to come and live up there.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
But I still went. But anyway, yeah, I was the one that was in despair.
Wow. And these moments where things aren't what we expect them to be, where, you know, we do everything that we think we're supposed to do. We make every plan that we think is right, and the bottom falls out. Or I know for missionaries, Beth in Georgia can be so much very easy this way, where missionaries are, you know, if you go and give your life to Jesus on the mission field, you should be rewarded with some sort of a magic holiness, right? Where all of a sudden you're these absolutely holy people who don't have to struggle because you've already made the sacrifice. You went to the mission field, and you discover you're struggling with the same character flaws and patterns, whatever, that you had before you went over there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
just in a more difficult.
What's that?
Sometimes it's just more difficult to change there.
Right, right. And I remember speaking at a homeschool meeting once, And it just came out as I just realized that, I mean, I did not have a great elementary school experience. And I decided, I read this book about homeschooling, and I thought, why not? I hated elementary school. I couldn't sit still long enough. And I would read the books, and you ever notice on the homeschooling book covers, you have these incredible pictures and images of, a mom with a daughter, or these children that look this family that's so happy and so exceptional.
Mm-hmm.
And I think subconsciously, I believed if I homeschooled, I had voted for that family. Now it's my due. And I remember talking at the conference, I said that the only thing I can figure out that happened once I started homeschooling was more work.
Mm-hmm.
It did turn out by far to be the best thing I could have done for my children. But I really expected homeschooling in and of itself to transform me into whatever it's supposed to transform you into. I don't know. But maybe it's just, my own magical thinking, but I think we all have a bit of that. And it isn't until it isn't until we fall. It isn't until it doesn't work. And we reach the end of our ability to make it work that we reach that threshold of despair. And it'll take us one way or another. It'll either take us into bitterness, because we can't. This is the thing. If we are used to having contempt for people who can't find a way out, who can't, contempt for people who give up or sink or can't make it, and then all of a sudden we're that kind of person, do you see how that becomes a threshold of real despair? Because I always prided myself on not being that kind of person. And now I am that person. And it can do a beautiful work of humility and healing, finding out what Jesus is doing, knowing him more intimately, or it can make us bitter and hardened. I just came from a family that had contempt for those who couldn't pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. And, I haven't been able to do that for decades now. And I'm so glad. I'm so glad it hasn't worked. And, just on the heels of that, you have what Jesus is saying. But woe to you who are rich. This is the Luke passage. For you have already received your comfort. And I think about the lady who, life is a bowl of cherries. What's wrong with these people who don't know how to enjoy life? She has all of her comfort. She has it now, and that's as much as she's going to get. We have, as a people, we have gotten progressively more and more wealthy till we are probably, in terms of the middle and upper middle class, the wealthiest culture that's ever existed in the history of Earth anyway. Prehistory, we don't know, but history. We have more comfort than kings used to have. I mean,
That's true.
yeah. And it isn't enough, is it? So the blessing of seeing that, the threshold of despair, is it makes us realize that we were born for a need for a much greater comfort than anything in a fallen world can give us. Comforts in and of themselves aren't bad. Neither is wealth. However, wealth is to be used wisely. It's an opportunity. And I don't have enough wisdom to be wealthy. Man, I don't have enough wisdom to be wealthy. But there are people who do. And they do wonderful things with their money, and it isn't their source of comfort. But I'm not one of them. I pretty much needed to be in every place I've been in, because Jesus has met me there and showed me something better. So when Jesus said this to the rich people there, it was to unsettle them. You see, he wasn't saying it in this, I hate you rich people, because he doesn't hate like that. He says, be like your Father in heaven, who is kind to the wicked as well as the good. He was saying this to the rich so that they could be shooken up a little and think about, wow, this man and all he offers is mutually exclusive. I mean, this man and our wealth. Finding all of our comfort in wealth and finding our comfort in Jesus it's not possible to do both. So he's saying this for the rich to wake up. Remember the rich young ruler. You wonder why he said that. What he said to the rich young ruler was, go sell all you have, give to the poor, and come and follow me. There's a lot of people who don't like that because that's not, I mean, wait a minute, the way of salvation is the cross. Why is he talking about giving away all your money? Well, that was what that rich young ruler needed to do. It's what he needed to hear. That's what he needed to do. And he couldn't. He couldn't give up the wealth, the power, and he walked away sadly. And Jesus was sad because he loved him. So Jesus is that, you know, it's this wonderful combination of telling hard truths, but loving the people you're telling them to. So now, all right, now it looks like it's going to be a very jarring juxtaposition here because I'm going to completely change subjects now and talk about mourning for our sin. And I went to James. I went to James just because it was there. And so, you know, that hard section, he is giving, okay, we can read it, but I almost feel like before we even look at it, to realize he's talking about the church that is catering to the rich, throwing the poor behind them, giving the rich special places, and making these incredible distinctions. And this church needed to repent. So he's not speaking to the poor people or the weak people. He's speaking to the rich, the arrogant, the proud, that they need to be broken. Okay? So keep that context in mind, because too often these things land as if Jesus is bombarding me when it's not me. You know, he may be teaching me something, but I'm somebody who tends to feel guilty for everything. And there are some people who feel guilty for nothing. And it seems to me that's what James is talking about here, although there's a word for us all in it. Okay, I'm going to do it now. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
Ooh.
Is Beth there?
I think so. Okay. James 4, 1-6. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You want something, but don't get it. You kill and covet, but you cannot have what you want. You quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive, because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures.
Okay, that's a little soft pedal from James. Okay, think of the last good fight you were in. This is good news when we can take it in the right way. It's sometimes really good to know that I can just let this one go. You know, what I want here, I just want it for my own sake. And as I spoke about last time, a lot of times what I try to do is just get rid of problems. So where I'm going to want to spend the money, time, and effort, it's just to fix things. And when something gets between me and what I think will fix a situation, I can get a little tense. That's where I will have the quarrels. And I have spent these last couple, 2-3 years now, really focusing on turning my life and my will over to the care of God. The serenity prayer, too, which I very much like. Lord, give me the serenity to accept the things I can't change. My sponsor is saying, look for the gift in it. There's always a gift in it, in these things I can't change, in these problems. And courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that's part of Jesus' peace and his rest that he wants to give us. And a lot of times, I swear, I see the red flag and I'm a bull going full speed after something. And it feels, I can mask my desires in such righteous tones. And one of the ways that I do is I feel like a victim. And a victim should get what she wants right away, right? She's already suffered enough. And it's just, it's a waste of time. It's a waste of effort. It's a loss. It's, to be a victim and to stay in that mentality is to choose to pout when there's a table spread before you, But that's when I'm going to quarrel and fight. And really, I think the bulk of the things that I have learned throughout the 30s and 40s and now 50s is to stop being, the bull that's going after the red flag that's going to solve all the problems. You can't solve your problems, and your idea of how to solve them, mine anyway, doesn't work. And when I ask God, do you understand how much God talks about answering prayer? Whatever you ask, it'll be given to you. Mm-hmm. And I think we've just come to accept that he didn't mean it, right? Sure. I mean, there's some spiritual, level way up there in the clouds where it means something, but it doesn't mean something down here where we live today. And I think James is telling us something here. It's hard with us when we talk about wrong motives, right motives, wrong motives, because that gets into right or wrong. Like I'm asking for the theologically correct item versus the theologically incorrect item. But spending what I get on my pleasures isn't just something that I do, and I struggle with this because I can be afraid to do anything for me. I'm not somebody who takes enough care of myself, and I've been learning about that. And so I could feel guilty here. But sometimes my pleasure is simply knowing what to do, like you talked about, Carol, knowing what to do and being able to do it, seeing a beginning and an end, and, I can get there. And, Dean used to make quite a bit more money than he does now, and I have seen that with less income, on several levels, we're doing better because we don't have the funds to work our answers. So, any thoughts for how you see that in your own lives, or? This is kind of a shut up verse, isn't it?
I just can't relate to quarreling and fighting in my own life right now, so it's kind of gotten me, I'm not relating to that part.
You're not quarreling and fighting?
I'm not relating, talking about unless it's quarreling and fighting with my own self, you know.
Right, right.
And I'm not totally identifying, I guess, other than asking with wrong motives, of course.
Right. And for me, sometimes it's not a quarrel, that it's a verbal quarrel. Although he's talking about within a church right here especially. This is a church situation and a church fighting with itself and with each other. But I can get in those dark moods that are, it really for me comes down to I really want this thing to happen. It's like putting out fires or keeping plates spinning. Can you relate to that? To try to keep the pieces together of my life so that there's not going to be a crisis or something I can't handle. And that's how it has been with me. It's much easier for me to relate to this right now because I did have a child later, and she's 18 now, and there's a tension between us every now and then. So, you know, you really, really, it's a wonderful gift to learn, but it's back. She's got to live her own life, you know. And so anyway, assuming that we might be trying to control our lives and keep the plates spinning, or, you know, put out the fires. Maybe there aren't any right now, but when they come up, that fix-it mentality, that put out that fire quick, or the plates look like they're falling, they're wobbling, I spin it, you know, keep it up there. That's how I apply that to me. Now, James is talking about something much more serious here in terms of churches and quarrels among the churches. So he's writing this to the church leaders, for the church. But Beth, can you read the next one?
You adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world is hatred towards God? Anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. Or do you think Scripture says without reason that the Spirit He caused to live in us envies intensely, but He gives us more grace? That is why Scripture says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble.
Yeah, it's getting easier, isn't it? Easier sailing here. What does that mean? Friendship with the world is hatred toward God. And if we choose to be a friend of the world, we become an enemy of God. Part of the danger in at least the conservatism of the Southeast anyway, I don't know what it's like in other parts of the country, is that we define worldly as, you know, I don't smoke and I don't chew and I don't go with guys who do. And, you know, certain modes of behavior, you know, drawing the line with the movies we see or the books we read, or you know, whether we drink or don't drink, and, you know, we have all these lines drawn that have absolutely nothing to do with worldliness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Worldliness has to do with finding your comfort in this life and siding with the rich and the powerful. You see, working your way up. We're every bit in the world as Christians when we're trying to be elite Christians, see, or in any level better than those people out there. It has been a real eye-opener for Anna for several reasons. She has, you know, we were involved in quite a lot, and a lot of things going on with me as well. And she wasn't with a church as much. She went to church, but she wasn't as involved with youth group for a while. Things like that had to do with our moving around and stuff. And when she got back into it, she was shocked to discover that there was this sort of understanding of who, you're a Christian who believes this, this certain way, or you're one of those. And nobody in there would have said that. Nobody in there would have even thought that, because as Christians, we're used to hanging around with each other. We get used to our own community. But Anna hadn't been in that community, and she was so confused by it. Because she had friends. I mean, she saw people as people first. And anybody who didn't know God, I mean, she told me this. This is what's so amazing. Anybody who didn't know God yet, that's such a loss for them. It's something you want for them. It's certainly not so you can put a label on their head, unbeliever, or that somebody, if somebody's gay. She just saw people as people. I didn't have a chance to get that out of her, church that out of her. And it was so refreshing for me, because we had been around all kinds of people in that time and gotten to know all kinds of people. And she just sees people as people, and Jesus is as something for everybody. He's someone for her more and more, and hopefully for other people. But do you see, if you have to have your theology right to be in the right group, if you're categorizing people, there's so many ways that we as Christians are friends of the world. We're using the exact same structures, the same models, the same power, the same advertising, so to speak. We're using all of that, and the only thing we lack is a humble compassion for the least among us. We lack that love. And so what do we do with that? I mean, some of that has to do with my view of God, because if I think God wants me to be elite, it gets so confusing, and I tend to think he wants me to be. Anybody else struggle with that?
Wants me to be an elite Christian, you mean?
Yeah, just, one of the better ones.
Yeah.
Well, you have the feeling that that's what he wants. That I don't have the feeling that I am, because I never get that far. But sometimes I feel guilty, because I think that's what he wants. A strong prayer warrior, somebody who is really super good at serving in the church. And I never feel like I'm there. And so sometimes I carry around guilt for that.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. It's exactly that. There's a model, and God's sort of looking around and, kind of going back, have you considered my servant Job? You kind of want him to say, hey, have you seen Sue over there in North Carolina? I don't feel I'm there. Of course not. I live inside my body. I know better. But it's easy to think that's what God wants. And you see, then all of a sudden God has become the very spirit of the world to us. You see? Because God is not in any way, shape, or form looking for Christians he can be proud of, or wanting us. I mean, we wouldn't call it pride, but there is this sense I could be happier, I'd be more fulfilled, wouldn't I? I'd be a much more fulfilled Christian if I did, pray harder and serve better, right?
And you feel like, too, that, you could somehow, that your life would affect people more positively in leading them to Jesus if you were a better example.
Right, if you were better.
You know, I always felt that when we were in Japan, you know, if only I could be better, then they could see how much better Jesus is.
Right. That's exactly, and that's what gets so confusing, because then we're just sort of mixing Jesus in with the spirit of the world. Because who does the world like? You know, the winners, right?
Mm.
And that ambition, when we think it's him, is so defeating, isn't it? Because we're stuck between the fact that we know him, and we are who we are, but he's disappointed. We're ineffective. If we could just be better. And Jesus...
And I used to think, too, that when we were in Japan, the reputation of Christians was a bunch of weak losers. That's how the Japanese felt about Christians, that they were a bunch of weak losers. And that's why they went to church. And that's why, you know.
That's awesome, because you are.
You don't. I wish I could have taken it. Wow. Yes.
That's so awesome. Wouldn't we love it if people thought that about us? You know? Because we are.
I knew in my mind that that's exactly right. And yet it still irritated me that we were thought of as a bunch of weak losers.
Yeah, it does me too. I'm sort of tongue-in-cheek here, but it is true. You know? But it's such a wonderful thing to realize that he's not. I mean, when he sees a crowd of people, it really changed my life to realize when he saw 5,000 people who had come to hear him teach, that were the very next day they were going to reject him. And I don't know how much he knew about that or knew their hearts. He had compassion on them because they're sheep without a shepherd. If he already has compassion on us, if he opposes the proud, he gives grace to the humble, and he wants us to be the kind of people who love that about him. You know what I mean? Who love that about him.
Mm-hmm.
Look at all the people he healed. And I think of what Paul says, think about who you were when you were called. Not many noble. You know, John chose, and it's great. It hurts the pride, but, you know, that's a good thing. Our pride's what's killing us. He gives grace to the humble. And the Spirit of God is a spirit that gives grace to those who need it. Do you see how much humility does it take? The humility to come. And the humility to want Jesus because we have nothing else. You see, nothing else of value. When it comes to praying, George, I read something. This was from Thomas Merton as well, and he just said a short sentence: prayer is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And I just paused about it. It's a gift of God that he talks to us. It's a gift. It was almost like a aha moment. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's a gift, not a burden. It's a gift. Good morning, Sue. You know, good morning.
Yeah.
Steadfast love is right here. My mercies never come to an end. Come to me. And so to be able to give up the pride. This is silly, but I remember we went to Veritas. Veritas is a private Christian school, and we had scholarships and all kinds of things going for us. And we had this van that was old. And every car in line was a whole lot nicer than ours. And I remember just hating feeling the odd one out, you know, because that from my past is really hard. And there's just this sense where Jesus is saying, you know, I'm right with you, girl. This is where I lived. But then somebody in my family, I inherited this gorgeous van that had the remote. I just loved it. I was like everybody else. I pushed the remote, the doors would open, my kids would get in, you know. And, oh, it's pitiful, isn't it? It's pitiful. He loves me too much to want me to live for that. See, this envy is a envy. Uh, it's the envy that a parent feels for a child who's getting into the wrong crowd. You know, it's a, you know, if the child was getting into the right crowd, you'd be thrilled.
Yeah.
But when they're getting into the wrong crowd, you're like, no, no, I love you. I love you. Here, look at me. Trust me. I love you. And that's what he's saying to us. Not, you're a jerk. I hate you. You're a loser. Never. You see, that's the system of the world. And when we put Jesus in that system, we just, you know, in a way we've taken off our armor and we've adopted this. We can become, you know, much more severe. We can go in any direction, but it's still the spirit of the world because we're trying to be something. And then what does he say next?
Submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning, and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up.
Okay, and again, this is not spoken from a nosebleed pulpit, you know, with a long finger. You know, the only people who got language like this in the Gospels was John the Baptist speaking to the Pharisees and Jesus speaking to the Pharisees and the scribes. He spoke like this to no one else. So these words are to the leaders and to the great. It's funny how, you know, when you're a multi-millionaire, people just think you're you know stuff, you know. And you think you know something. Somehow when you're ultra rich, you somehow think it's fitting and right. You know what I mean? You do. And if you are, if you're using the church, you see, using your time coming before God to elevate your numbers, to elevate your status, to do your good deeds in front of everybody, you know, we do it so much that we really don't think Jesus meant what he said. You know? You've got your reward. You've got your reward. But not you. Don't you do that. Do you see? Don't. You know, let's do it in secret. And this idea that God will reward us, it's not the same reward as the world. You know, it's the reward. I remember having a day. I know I shift gears. I've noticed that when I listen. I shift gears without warning and without labels. This is an experience I had of discovering a different kind of reward, a different kind of joy. I wasn't doing, I mean, I've been trooping along. I've been doing okay, but we've been going through a lot of bumpy stuff, and I've been tired, and achy, and things going on, and I was just kind of flat. And I was at the 12-step meeting that I go to, and there was this girl next to me who is more Catholic in persuasion, but very much wants to know Jesus. She's desperate to know him. And I just had a chance to talk to her about him. And all of a sudden, I just felt, wow, Jesus, thanks. You know, I wasn't coming into that meeting to witness. I wasn't trying to do anything. I just had the chance, and there was so much joy in it between me and my Father and Jesus. I think that's what he's talking about. You know, it was wow, wow. So for us, we can't whip ourselves into this. We may not be there. This is speaking for a certain group of people. But Jesus really means it. When he's saying, let go of the show. Let go of it. Humble yourself before me, and I myself personally will be the one lifting you up. And there's times when we mourn. And I'm already seeing that our time is up. The one thought I want to add with this, and I don't have the verse right here with me, but I remember I was going to talk about the two different kinds of mourning. I guess I'll do that next week. But I want to say this much ahead of time. We are going to be looking at Jesus, who is mourning and grieving, and there is no comfort. None at all. He looked for comforters. There were none. My God, why have you forsaken me? And the important thing for us to realize is that the reason we can be comforted and will be comforted when we don't deserve it, is because Jesus wasn't comforted when he did. He gave up his own comfort. Besides the comforts, he gave up the comfort he so desperately needed in the garden and needed on the cross when his Father turned his face away, so that we will never, ever, ever be without the comfort that comes from our Father's face and from the love of God in our souls. And I wanted to get that in there for us to think about. When James is speaking this strongly, it's because people are hanging on to a kind of comfort that will destroy their own souls, when there is the very comfort of God guaranteed to us by the Son, who was willing to go without comfort. And the only reason is because he wanted us to be comforted. So the passage I had, if you go to look for it, it's comfort, my people. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem. Proclaim to her that her hard service has been completed, that her sin has been paid for, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins, meaning they're taken away, that's one, upon Jesus, and his righteousness given to us freely. And everything he earned is now ours, simply because he wanted it. That's what he wanted. Love plus nothing. That's what he wanted for us. Any last thoughts?
That's a good thought to be left with.
Yeah. It is. You get the idea that his love is beyond comprehension and measure, depth, height, breadth, and length. And I'm so glad.
Yeah. And I think the ability of it, just thinking in general as we've talked about mourning, that the ability to mourn makes you so much more aware of all that God has for you beyond the mourning, that if we're happy and content with what we have here, that it really is the mud puddles, and that if we're not mourning those mud puddles and if we're enjoying them, that we'll just miss the ocean.
Right.
And all that the Spirit has to do in our hearts to help us to come to that place of mourning, because it's not a place we go to readily.
Exactly. Very well said.
We are entranced by the comforts of this world. I know I am. entranced, not entranced, but, you know, I move in that direction. It's my default.
Right.
And yet, you know, he's so gracious to keep nudging and pushing and pulling and dragging
Kicking and screaming, dragging us.
me to a place where, you know, I'll recognize that this is not what it's all about. You know, this life is utterly broken, and it's not what it's about.
Exactly. Exactly. And that reminds me, you ready for a little advertisement?
Okay.
I have totally revamped my website this week. And so under hissmile.com, it is totally transformed into a place for people who are, you know, just feeling on the wrong side of life, you know, for those who are struggling, those who feel, you know, on the, well, you can see, I can't even come up with the words. You have to go look at my website. But I know, Georgia, you guys read it, but I put in a sheep story. I wrote a sheep story, and I put it under news. I've changed everything about my website. It's totally changed. I do ask you to pray because Carol, I've been through quite a bit in the last 10 years or so, 15 years, facing my own past and how traumatic it was. And so I had to go through, I had to go through this horrible period of, instead of memories, it's almost like you're reliving them and getting to the place where I could come out the other side. And so I'm writing a blog that is that tells a bit of that story, especially with the help that I'm getting. I mean, 12-step groups are really, I joke around about it being like kindergarten, everything you learn in kindergarten that I didn't learn. It's somewhat that way, but but just pray for that because I put a lot of stuff out there. And you just, in any thoughts you have, if you email, I would appreciate it. But the sheep story is on the news section. If you hit the news tab, you'll see sheep story. And that's the whole story of those. I used to tell those to Anna, and I couldn't believe the impact they've had on her life. But we would make them up at night. So anyway, take a look at that.
Put the Monday shorts on them?
No, I decided not to. I decided to just have a link to them.
Okay.
How do I get Monday shorts? How do I get that?
I'll just put you on the list. Do you want them?
Yeah, because I have gotten...
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have a list of people. I used to do a lot of speaking and teaching and stuff and collecting people who wanted to get these. They're just very short messages, meditations on Monday.
Because I got summer shorts one time, but then I didn't stop getting anything.
Huh.
Because we used to do summer shorts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I got that, and then I stopped getting anything.
Huh. Well, I'll fix that because I've had a couple years now Monday shorts. They're all collected on one website, and it's just so well done. So there's a link to look at them, and then there's a link to join. But, Carol, you don't have to because I have your email address already. Okay. And I also have a Bible study I wrote, and I've run out of leaders' guides, so I'm just making them an ebook. The leader's guide is really the heart of the story. It's a Bible study in and of itself, and it's $5 for an ebook on Selfie. So if you know anybody who might like that, there's that as well. But I just, if you just read it, give me your thoughts on it, and I would love to hear.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. You all have, should I say a happy week or a miserable week? No. A comforted week. A week full of comfort. How's that?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right,
Thank
take
you
care.
very much.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.